Welcome back to the X Podcast. I am here with Tim and Zach.
I'm very proud of you.
Yeah, and your nicknames.
That took everything in me because the juices started flowing of nicknames before this started, and I am exercising self-restraint. You have the pink energy drink from The Office that the Asian dude from the warehouse launched when he won the lottery.
Yeah.
Who?
Don't know who that is. Don't watch
The Office. Speaking of
What
The
did you
Office,
just-
we won't hold that against you. You started down that road, but some people backslide. Here is something to consider,
Same
though.
thing can be said for you in Harry Potter books.
That's
true.
Yeah, no,
That true?
no.
No, it is true. He
yeah.
started and then he didn't finish. So someone say that's backsliding.
I backslid on the movies real fast. I got to be honest with
But
you.
backsliding means that you are sliding back from something wonderful and beautiful. And The Office is just something that is just, it's epic.
I mean, I'm not denying that there are lots of people in this world,
Yeah.
more than not, who say The Office is epic.
Wait, you don't like the Office?
And you did like it when you started it.
I like it.
Yeah.
I don't. It doesn't have the same pull and gravitas to me that it does for other people. Which, to be fair, that
what
can
would
be,
replace that for you?
that can be said for Harry Potter. What?
What would that replace? What
Old
show?
Disney movies.
What show would maybe replace that for you? What would fill for him? The Office is like the pinnacle. What would fill that for you?
What percentage of
Lost.
Lost.
that-
he loves Lost too.
You redeemed some of your points. If this is purgatory, you're sliding back out. What?
You're getting yourself out.
But what percentage would you say, honestly, though, of what you watch is throwbacks? Because I feel like most time when you talk about something you watched, it was you went back to an old movie from the 90s or an old Disney classic or a, you know.
I'm not gonna lie, probably above 50%. I would say that, but the average, like my TV time and my Netflix time and it is very, very low.
Now, I will say, I will give
In general, you mean you just don't watch a lot of TV?
I will give Zane Zachary this. I will say this.
Yes,
You turned me on to my new favorite show.
Severance.
Yes, which
Which now you surpassed me on it.
yeah,
I'm on
now
episode 5.
You're on episode 5. It is like The Office and Lost had a baby. It really is.
Really?
Which sounds
Everyone says
impossible.
it's the best show ever.
I need
But-
to watch that.
It's good.
Is it good?
It's
good.
like
Okay.
it's slow moving in moments, but
Like
it's.
Lost.
I feel like Lost is never slow moving, but like
Well, I mean, it's just a long, drawn-out story.
Story.
It's just that's what I mean by slow moving, like character developments.
yeah, there's parts of Severance that's a slow burn, but the cinematography, the acting, how provocative and like crazy the storyline and like concept is, it's mesmerizing. And then like when you get towards the end of season 1, the slow, it's great along the way, but there's a slow burn effect at times. But when you get to the end, it just goes nuts. And it's
Really?
like the payoff is like just spectacular. It's crazy. It's like the number 1 show now.
It is.
Like the
It
number 1
is.
rated show.
It's on Apple TV.
Did you finish it?
I'm one. So now they're the place where they're coming out each week.
Yeah, on season.
And so the most current one that's on Apple is episode 7 of season 2. I fell asleep in the middle of episode 7 last night as I was going to sleep. So I'm almost caught up. And it's just awesome.
Really?
It's so good.
Keep that in mind.
You need to watch it.
Yeah.
And I feel like
for sure.
you know
Probably
the
do it.
premise, right?
No.
Explain the premise.
Without ruining it for anybody that hasn't seen it, including
so
me.
the premise is there is it's a futuristic, let's say futuristic,
Somewhat futuristic.
somewhat futuristic, but the not so distant future society, and there is this, let's call it a tech company that has been set up, and there's a certain floor of the tech company that if you work on this floor of the company, you have to have a procedure done to you known as severance, which is where you when you step onto your work floor, all prior memories of who you were, who you are, your relationships, your life, I mean, everything's gone. All you know is your work life and what you experience like at work. And then when you step out of that,
you don't remember any of it.
You
Yes.
forget all of that.
So your
and it's
work
all
self-
gone.
So it's for privacy's sake or whatever.
Yes,
Security.
and it's very controversial in society. But like, so your work self, they literally they refer, like the people on the inside refer to their outer selves as your Audi, and they'll all be like, I wonder what my Audi is like. Like, I wonder if they're married. Because if you're married, you would never know it. You would never know it. Like, it's almost like a Groundhog's Day over and over again. Like, you get on the elevator, the next thing you know is you're coming back,
You wake up.
The elevator,
Yes.
not that you wake up, but the elevator's opening again. And so all you know.
Oh, you don't actually know your other side of your
You
life.
have no idea what your
You're-
house looks like. You have no idea if you have friends. You have
Sounds like torture.
Yeah, and
I mean,
so,
in many ways, right? That's all.
well, and you find out, without ruining it, you find out why some people chose to do this. There's some people, sometimes it's like
Forgetting.
forgetting part of your life
Yeah,
that you want to
I
forget out of
understand
pain. But it's,
That's
it's
interesting.
so fascinating.
That same person, though, it's like they have like almost a dual life, and it's
Correct.
split. So that same person, when they're outside of work,
Hence the title.
it's always outside of work.
Yep.
Yes.
Family life, this and that.
Yep.
Yep.
They have no idea. Like the Audi has no idea what the innie's like and what they're doing during the day. And the innie has no idea what the Audi's like.
Interesting.
It
premise.
is fascinating.
Okay. That
Anyways,
makes me want to watch it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So good. So good. And all the actors and actresses are just phenomenal.
Oh, that's cool.
It's got what's his face from Man on Fire, the older guy.
Yeah.
What's his name?
I don't know who it is.
Anyways,
Yeah. All right.
so
Severance.
good. Gotta watch Severance. Speaking of severance and career and money and finance,
Nice segue.
I want to ask Millionaire Moore here some questions.
Oh my
we
gosh.
have
Millionaire.
He fit it in.
fit it in, shoehorned it in right at the buzzer. All right.
I take back all that I said about your self-restraint and
Yeah, it's gone.
You know what?
And your
I don't know what order these will be in, but going back to the Brendan Bouchard episode,
Yeah.
I'm proud of myself.
Good for putting that in there.
That was
well,
good.
Well
I'm
done.
proud of myself. We've been in the middle of a series
Yeah.
called Money Matters.
Nope. It's an old one.
I know,
That goes way back.
I'm just kidding, but I think somebody said that. But it is called How to Think About Money.
Yeah.
And
Money matters.
in many ways, it comes from a book I think all three of us have been reading called The Psychology of Money. And fascinating book. And I think I told you, there's this girl, I think she's like the new Dave Ramsey, the young, hip, female British Dave Ramsey, Nisha. And she has all these YouTube clips. Did you ever watch any of those?
Yeah, I
That's
watched
not
it.
y'all?
Yeah, you sent me something. I watched it.
And she talked about like the top 10 finance books. And I feel like this is hitting like all those kind of gurus, their top 10 books on finance and money. Some people love it. Some people hate it. People that hate it primarily is not because of agreement or disagreement with the content, but because it's a money book that's not really practical.
It's not really.
It is.
Yeah,
The title is true to form.
Yeah.
It is all about how you think about money, and really nuances and makes more provocative and interesting the idea of our approach to money is not just math, but it's mental. It's our DNA, our background, our upbringing, our desires, our regional cultural norms, and it's just been fascinating.
Yep.
And so the series has been phenomenal, and you're finished with the book.
Yeah, I finished it before I did the series, but
I'm like,
I finished
think
it last year.
I'm like halfway
actually,
through.
less, about a quarter.
Yeah.
I
But
finished it last year, and it was. I thought the approach. I thought it was brilliant to bring to an actual message series on Sunday for a community. And so it's kind of like the angle is what I borrowed. I've used a little bit of and this actually, well, by the time this episode comes out, but I'm using kind of a little bit of an analogy that he kind of paints toward the end of the book. It's really fascinating. But the premise that kind of grabbed my attention when I was thinking about most people that I want to say, because one of the things we do as a community when it comes to money is we try to help people build a foundation for success when it comes to their financial world. And one of the things that we do, for example, and you're involved in helping with this financial freedom, a workshop that we offer at least once a year that people can come to. And we have some financial experts in our church that you work with to, to help actually, whether if you need help with a budget, you need help figuring out expenses to get rid of, you need to figure out how to get out of debt.
Yeah.
And we do use Dave Ramsey's tool
Yep.
as well. And even the one we have coming up in March, people can come to that and they have a way to get access to the whole program. I mean, we really try to resource people
Yes.
to help them, because I feel like it is one of the biggest weights and burdens that we carry, especially here in the Western world in America. People are just overwhelmed by their finances.
Yeah.
And I don't think so. My daughters, at least I know my youngest did, they require in high school a financial literacy class. And I don't know why, but it feels like a big waste of time. I mean, it's probably, there's some good stuff in it, but you also know when you're a high school student, all you want to do is graduate, and you're a senior, you're not paying attention very much. And they're going to tell you basic stuff about checks that you've never seen if you're a high school student. They're going to tell you some, there's some basic things, which is probably a good foundation, but I have found that to be quite lacking when I've had conversations with not just them, but with, I feel like, a lot of younger people when it comes to, like, how do I actually think about money? And one of the approaches that I really like that he kind of takes from in this book is the idea that people don't probably need more information. And yes, there's some that it can help, but the bigger issue is our behavior with money. It's like, you could know I really shouldn't just go keep using my credit card over and over to shop and buy stuff that I can't afford. But why can't we stop?
It's interesting. Dave Ramsey is uber practical, but even he in all his books talks about the power of emotion. And he has a quote, I'm just remembering a statistic. He says that finance is 80% behavior and 20% knowledge. And so they have that whole thing of, is this person gazelle intense?
Yeah.
And so it's, and in my mind, I just got an image of, like, he talks about the power of emotion. This book deals about the stories that hold our emotions.
Yes.
Of why we feel that way.
Yeah.
It really does.
That's
And so one of the reasons why I love this and I wanted to bring kind of this angle. So the topics that we're addressing, we deal with a core motivation in the first week, and that idea of happiness, of what's motivating us toward money. And it's, have we kind of bought this idea that money can buy happiness?
Yeah.
And, so we kind of we dealt with a fear that we have of running out, and we've got, other things that we're doing as we walk through the series. So I've really tried, it's been kind of an interesting but challenging way to approach. There's things in scripture that we kind of pull out principles and we just usually share and teach. And if you never heard this, let me teach it. But I've had to really kind of, a lot has come from and been, can I say, even personal part of my journey. Like the way I just had a guy in my business circle, and he just said, I just wanted to tell you, like, the messages that you've done this series. And even like the last one, he was like, I don't know how you do it, but I feel like you know exactly what I'm wrestling with. And we were just having a conversation about this last week, and I don't know how you do it. And I said, well, it's not that complicated. I actually just look internal and go, what is my pain point? What's my stress? What's my challenge with this? And I speak to it from that, because I know if I'm dealing with it, my guess is you're dealing with it. He's like, oh, that makes sense. So it's like, as much as I want to manage money well, it's still, I have to check and go, what's the motivation in my heart? Why do I feel like I need more money? What am I trying to get? Am I trying to get something that I can't actually get through money? I have to ask those kind of questions. And fear of running out, still I feel it all the time. I don't care what you have. Like, you get a bill that's unexpected, you get this, you get a season, and just had a car accident, right? And car wrecks, and now you have to go replace a car, and I wasn't anticipating having a car payment because my car's been paid for. And all of a sudden now I'm doing that, and you're going, oh, okay, how does that fit into the plan? And so these are just real concerns and fears and things that people have. And so the approach has been more of like, let's kind of get to the psychology of why we think about this.
And, just how we're raised. I was telling you, I'm doing premarital counseling for this couple. They're probably 23. And I've never done this for a couple that I've just been like so encouraged by every single aspect. Their purity, their mindset, their maturity, their emotional maturity, the way they handle conflict, everything. I'm like so encouraged by them, and also like so like, okay, I'm starting to like be filled with regret as I look at like, and when we got to finances, both of them, I mean, 22, 23 years old, and zero debt on either side, and the amount, I won't say it, but the tens and tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars that they already have in savings because they've just been wise and stuff. I'm just like, man, I am so proud of y'all, and they've both had good like role models, and I'm just like, but you know, how do you learn from different points of view and also not be filled with regret? Because I'm like, man, I wish that was my story.
Well,
but isn't that one of the things he addresses at first? That like you're not crazy. Like basically, I think it's the first chapter. He talks about how we all have different stories and we all have different things that like make up the way we think about. No, I'm not saying that to justify behaviors or patterns or whatever it is, but just understand that you had unique circumstances and things that impacted you. I had unique circumstances, things that impacted me. Same for you, Pastor Tim. And I just think that like, I think money is one of those topics that the reason why it's hard to talk about is because it brings so much shame into people's lives. And they look back on moments where, you know, I should have done this, or what if I had done this, or what if I had made that investment or not done this. And I just think that like understanding that you are a unique set of circumstances and makeup and DNA and things that like kind of define your story that have helped get you to where you're at, beginning to unpack a little bit about that, understanding your biases, understanding how and why you think about money and even things the way you do, that sometimes I think that's just a great starting point for people that no one ever thinks about when it comes to thinking about money.
Yeah. Okay. I have a question for you guys. Let's take a moment and try to connect. What do you see of your upbringing or the soil in which you were raised when it comes to finances that has affected or shaped your behaviors or things that you have thought about money, either good or bad?
I have one. It's probably neutral, but probably lends itself to bad behavior when it comes to money. Is that money was a means to an end, and I think mostly, for the most part, it is always a means to an end. But in this case, it was a means to an end to pursue things that provided instant gratification versus pursuing things that led to delayed gratification.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah. So like,
is this hard to do without calling out parents and this and that for things that they did?
Well, no. Like I can even give it an example. Like for me, like whenever I was like my first couple jobs, like I remember, in fact, you'll laugh about this, but I was a pizza boy working at Papa Murphy's Pizza.
Papa Murphy's?
Yeah, about a mile from here is where...
There was one in Pickerington at one point.
There's one in Canal.
Was it really?
Yeah, literally, right?
The take and bake Papa Murphy's kind of thing?
Right, that's where my first job was Papa Murphy's Pizza. And I just remember...
Delivery or making?
We didn't deliver because it was like take and bake. So like you'd come in and we'd make
They're
it.
not ready. You just come and take them
then
and
you
buy
go
them.
home and bake it yourself, and it'd be like a fresh
that's cool.
pizza. Anyways, so I remember doing that job, and I'd get my paychecks and do whatever, and there was no like oversight or helping me think through what to do with that money.
Yeah.
And so I would just, I want to buy a video game, or I want to
spend it all.
Just spend it all on whatever I wanted in that moment. And so, and I think that was something that kind of our whole family's mindset was. And so I think that it was a means to an end to pursue things of instant gratification versus, no, it can be a means to an end to bring something like, for example, are you saving for a much bigger thing or for retirement or like whatever it is. And I think that that's a lesson I didn't learn until later on in life. I wish I had figured it sooner.
It could create a is a good example of what it could do, which is create a paycheck to paycheck kind of mentality where you spend and consume, all of it.
Yes.
That's good. I think I grew up. My parents, and I've talked about it. I did on Sundays. They were really frugal. Mister, he says I'm massively frugal. I'm just telling you where it comes from. But
when you're talking at the beginning, and you're like, we all have shame in our stories, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, yeah, that's a great reminder, and it's very, very true. And then I'm thinking, but I feel there's an anomaly.
No.
And I'm not, and I say it jokingly, but honestly, and it's a great thing. I just feel like you have always been disciplined and frugal and intentional with your money, and I wonder at times. I'm like, does he have any shame? I feel like most people do.
I've made some bad purchases. I've made a lot of bad investments. They've been really bad. It did set me up with a good foundation. My dad was. I won't say this. I was going to say something, and I think that's probably not appropriate to say. It was kind of a stereotype of a group of people from which I am. But my dad was the type who was...
What was it you were going to say?
I shouldn't say it. Okay. So my dad was always...
Whisper it.
Massively, frugal.
Okay.
But he grew up in an environment that didn't have a lot, so I think it kind of developed out of that. My mom grew up out of a little bit more means, and I think her mindset was a little bit different. I think there is something to kids, and I think we have to see that as you got kids growing up, right? When they grow up and they have stuff versus growing up and not having as much stuff. Whether that's what, some people say creates entitlement, it creates this mentality. And we see it maybe with the youngest generation. I think one of the tensions that people have in the youngest generation is they've grown up maybe at this point, Gen X and millennial parents, older millennial parents, they've grown up in a time where they've had maybe a lot or have grown up with a good amount of a certain lifestyle. And I've watched as I've seen younger people grow up and they think, oh, I should live in a house like my parents. Oh, I should be able to drive a car like my parents drive, even though they've had 30 extra years of earning and paying off things and making decisions, and then get, and I think some of that is just what you grow up in. It really does set the mindset. And so my parents, I don't know any time in our life, and I may not have known our finances that well general as a kid, I don't think they ever had debt for anything except for a house, ever. They never borrowed money to pay for a car. It helps when you're an auto mechanic by trade, which my dad was before he's pastor. So he would keep old cars running great and would fix them, and we'd help him do that. So never borrowed for a car, never borrowed for anything. We did not have a lot of, I've said this, we didn't have a lot of brand name stuff. We didn't, there wasn't a lot of excess, but we were taken care of. And I think that kind of rubbed off. So then when we first got married, my wife and I was like, and we didn't have a lot of money, but I was just massively frugal and was not spend money on anything. Over the years, I've had to kind of loosen that grip. And I have now where I'll spend money on things, and I'm at a point where I'll buy something nice, a pair of shoes, because I like shoes. So I bought plenty of shoes lately, But you guys, my wife, for probably the first 10 years, anything to buy or go do would be like, she would want to buy something, even if it's not crazy nice, but I would resist. And so it's taken a while to get that a little bit out of my system to an extent. We're a little bit more of I'd say level-headed and balanced and will on some stuff, but there's still like fancy food. I grew up, I've said this before, I really do think that stuff, I could care less about ever eating at a fancy restaurant, ever. Go take me to a really good pizza shop, and I'll be happier than a $100 steak.
How do you feel about that?
I'm just saying I will, and I think, I think a lot of it has to do with how we grew up. Like, we didn't ever hardly go. When we went out to eat growing up was on Sundays.
Yeah.
Either I think it was Ryan's or it was like one of those like places, the buffet type places. They would say free, kids eat free for pastors.
Golden Corral.
But can I give a little challenge?
But I won't matter.
But you're highlighting the value difference though, because I know for you,
that was my challenge. I'm not going to. I'm not challenged in the sense of right or wrong.
Sure.
But my question more would be what he just said, is because there are things, and you're still extremely frugal, but there are things you will invest in because you have a value for them.
Yeah.
So I just say that to say, I wonder if like eating out for you, I wonder if that's still a frugality thing as much as it is, you just don't have a value for it.
Yeah. Probably
Maybe both.
Maybe
Yeah.
both. I think, but that's what I'm saying. My point is, I think, like, I mentioned this when I did the very first weekend. I was like, I don't remember, like, we didn't eat a whole lot of meals. We ate dinners, but not a lot. But most of what I can remember, and this is probably bad, and so I apologize, Mom, if you're listening, or Dad, because this is probably not reflection of what they did or tried to do when we were teenagers. But I feel like half of the time, half a week, we just kind of fended for ourselves for, like, it was like cereal for dinner. And she probably did make something, and we ate a little bit of it, but we wanted this, who knows? And so
You're also a picky eater.
Huh?
You're also a picky
Yeah,
eater.
you
that
are
too.
very picky
Well,
eater.
guess what? That also comes from an environment. My dad is too. There's so much. Again, the point is, there's so much of it is learned and it is like absorbed in the environment in which you grow up that affects you financially. So I'm grateful today that I probably grew up in a more frugal environment than a free-flowing environment. Mm-hmm. I'm probably grateful because I'd rather err on that side when it comes to financial than on the other side and throw caution to the wind and maybe not make good decisions. So I'm grateful for that, but I've also had to, like, it's taken my wife a long time and for me to, like, loosen the grips to go, it's okay to go buy this. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just been part of the journey, and so
It served you well. It served you really well.
in certain areas. But yes, I don't value certain things, but I think partly I don't value them because of probably what I grew up with, or just how we started in life. It might not even be them, how we started in life. Yeah. We didn't have any money. We didn't go out to eat. Mm-hmm. It was just.
I wonder. Because, in the book, you talked about there's just so many different factors that affect our mindset. Mm-hmm. And so sitting here listening to you and thinking about my own story, I'm like, I wonder if this is an example of nature versus nurture. Because your dad was really frugal, so you became frugal. My dad was really frugal.
You went the opposite
I did not
way.
become frugal.
You rebelled.
While I'm very influenced by my parents, like, so much of what you say you absorbed, I'm like, yeah. I mean, my parents aren't picky eaters, but it's just later in life I found different passions. Like, I wasn't a foodie when I was 10 or even 18. I didn't become a foodie until I was like 24, and I just kept branching out, exploring different parts of me that I discovered. I'm like, oh, I really appreciate that. I have an appreciation for this and that. And my dad, maybe just as frugal as you. Yeah. But that the gene the gene didn't translate. And they say also, like, and not in every couple, but in most couples, you have a saver and you have a spender. Yeah. My mom would be this. My mom, HSN, she keeps them in business. She keeps HSN in business. Now, having said that, though, I wouldn't exactly draw a parallel between, like, your upbringing and mine, because while my dad is very frugal, and we were not rich by any means. My parents were educators. My mom's a second grade teacher. My dad's a high school English teacher. Now, when he moved into administration, assistant principal, athletic director, that helped more, and I never went without, and they were always very, very good to me. And so I probably had your, what do you call it, your middle class, I guess, class, probably your typical middle class, experience. And so maybe part of it for me is, while we weren't rich, I never went without, and I was very blessed in that way. And so for me, my mindset to overcome, probably in the words of my parents when I was young, is Russ, money doesn't grow on trees. And it's just because I think that's probably where, like, nature versus nurture, but then your own personality. Sure. Mm-hmm. My personality growing up was so, like, my mind was on everything but that. Mm-hmm. So I just wasn't money-minded. I wasn't driven by money, right? But I also probably didn't think enough about money. It was just like, I'm going to live life. And, and you learn and you make mistakes and you crash and burn. You're like, oh, I need to pay at least a little bit more attention here, at least a little bit more attention here. So it is fascinating.
But you've done a good job of managing your money through the years, would you say?
Yeah, ish. I is what I say. I mean, I've told you this. Like, I think early on, even as carefree spirit spenders I am, I always, for whatever reason, even before, like, Dave Ramsey, I always had a kind of conservative mindset towards debt.
Yeah.
I didn't like the idea of accruing a ton of debt. Just always kind of scared me. So I've never just like accrued a ton of debt. And then I'm very fortunate early in life. Shortly after I gave my life to Jesus, I had people explain to me the tithe. So I got, by the grace of God, I got that part right early on. And then this is where behavior comes in instead of knowledge. I've read every Dave Ramsey book at least 3 or 4 times, and I've been through FPU 2 or 3 times. I've helped teach FPU. So I say this to my shame, not as a brag, but there's been probably in my young adulthood to adulthood, there's been several times where I went through the Dave Ramsey plan, got debt free, built up emergency fund, all that kind of stuff. And then I remember like moved to Atlanta in 2014. I had this, part of my package. I had this enormous house, way too big for a single guy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I got to furnish it. I really only ended up furnishing a couple rooms.
Yeah.
And went from debt free to now I have some debt with, Value City Furniture. So I look back on just certain stupid things like that. But yeah, I mean, overall, I've been pretty conservative with money. Yeah. My biggest regret is after staying clear mostly from debt and, being generous with the tithe, paying bills, there's just so much of that extra money that if I could have at least 50% of it, just been so much more intentional, so much earlier on to save and invest. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's to me, that's the greater regret. Not that I've just made just hugely stupid decisions with money.
Yeah.
It's just that, oh my gosh, if I had been so much more intentional along the way, if I'd exercised a little bit more self-restraint here, a little bit more self-restraint there. I will say this though, just one last little thought when talking about my dad. Not only do I think the psychology of money is really great for understanding yourself and helping yourself financially, I really do think, not to treat it like the Enneagram, but I actually think it can be a great empathy connection tool for understanding others and having more empathy for others. And this may sound odd, but I was thinking about this when we talked about doing this podcast. Maybe my single most, this sounds weird, one of my single most memorable moments with my dad is I remember we were in Iceland. So Iceland? Yeah, we were in Iceland, 2021. And it was one of those perfect days. The sun had come out. We found this beautiful little restaurant, greatest seafood I've ever had in my life. And I don't remember why or how we got on the topic. Because me and my dad, we've always had tension because the way we look at money is just so different. And, we would kind of butt heads at times. And I knew that he'd come out of Great Depression era, and there's a reason for it. But for whatever reason, we sat down and had a 2-hour-long conversation where he actually shared his whole story about money. And it was just like, I don't remember how. It was just so organic, but it was like, share with me stories I'd never heard before. Talk to me about what it was like growing up. Talk to me about, he was vulnerable about some of the mistakes they made and what it's been like. And at the end was like, so I don't know if this helps you understand a little bit more how I look at it. And it was actually like one of the most connective moments Father's Son we'd ever had. And it's talking about money. Wow. But I do think that's the power, even just in this book and thinking about the psychology of money, is not just understanding how you think about it, but how others think about it.
Yeah. All right. Zach, question for you. What is one of the best moves that you've ever made financially? And what's one that you regret?
This is easy.
All of us do that one.
Okay, so which one am I going to start with?
Doesn't matter. Either best financial move or greatest regret.
Let's go sequentially. So I've told this story when I've taught Financial Freedom Workshop before. Okay. But, I, growing up, got my license, had a couple of accidents, figuring things out, ended up with this went kind of from like broken down car to broken down car, cheap, whatever. So I'm in college and getting ready to move on from college, and I am working for this summer camp, and we're literally driving from place to place to place. And I was driving this $2,000 1998 Dodge Durango, got like 10 miles a gallon. Dude. And it was so old, and it was broken down.
I can picture you in a Durango for some reason.
Dude, it was a great car. I loved it. I loved how big it was and all the different things. And but it was on its last leg. And so I drove it onto this car lot in a town that we were in, and
No, I see where this is going.
And I mean, if I was a sucker for, if I had a sign over my head that said like easy sale, this guy, go to him.
A salesman dream.
Oh, dude, it was so easy. And this guy snapped me up, took me to this used car, and it had all the bells and whistles and all the things, and it was amazing. And I didn't, care that it was a used car that was like 7 years old, that had already like 70,000 miles on it, and had been driven a lot, and but it had like a little LCD thing with like a MapQuest on it, or like GPS on it, and a CD player.
Probably a thing back then.
All the things, and it was just like this was 2013, so yes, it was definitely a thing back then. Had a sunroof.
Yeah, I think we were still printing our instructions out whenever we traveled somewhere in 2013.
So he says, I look at the price and I'm like, is that the price? And it's the sticker price, like on the. He's like, yep, that's the price. And I'm like, okay. I was like, I'll take it. He's like, let's go see if we. He goes, I'll see if I can get you qualified. He goes, how much do you make? I made $250 a week working for this company, this Christian summer camp I was doing. The car cost like $17,000, and somehow, I don't know how, dude got me approved for this alone. And I'm like, this is amazing. So I remember driving up the lot thinking, I'm like, this is amazing, this is awesome. And you know how when you drive a car, typically it's not that month or the month after before the payment kicks in, but so the payment comes and it's the first month it's due, and I just started my first big boy job, and I'm working for a church, and the bill shows up and it's $384. And I'm like, I don't have $384. Just not gonna pay it. So
what?
So that
you didn't pay it?
I didn't pay it. So so that goes on for 3 months, and all of a sudden I get a knock on the door, and there's a man who shows up on my door, and he's like, "Hey, is that your car out there?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, if you don't give me this much money by tomorrow, it's not going to be there." And I was like, that's when it hit me. Like, oh.
That you had to pay for it?
I knew I had to pay for it, but
wait.
I
don't. What? No.
Come on, you bully.
No, I'm just like, wait, what?
I just realized.
Wait, did you not think you were going to have to pay for it?
No, I knew I was going to have to pay for it. This is the mistake.
Okay.
I didn't know what to do. I was in a hole, and it was so.
No, don't say all now.
Oh, I do feel bad.
We got it figured out. And
wait, you didn't get it repossessed?
No, we got it figured out.
Wow.
And I didn't miss a payment after that, I'm proud to say. But that's when I went to the library and got my first Dave Ramsey book.
Really?
I just consumed it all, and that was the beginning of my.
How old were you?
I was 23 years old.
Wow.
23 years old.
That's crazy.
That is how old I was. When I moved from Greenville to Lexington, Kentucky, as part of the church plant team, Pastor Lee, who was my youth pastor at the time, he was getting ready to become all of our lead pastor. He literally, because it was like 12 college-age students and several families all moving, and he literally had us all buy a copy of The Total Moneymaker by Dave Ramsey, and we went through it together.
Yep.
I have so many. So my kind of like that story, but not as painful, is I was at American. I think I told this first time I preached here when I did the Dead Attack. But I was at American Eagle, and I was like, getting ready to go on a date, and I was like, I want this shirt. And they're like, all right, great. Well, if you can get the rewards card, you can get 10% off. And I was like, all right, cool. And they used all the slick language that I would eventually use at the buckle. And I was like, all right, cool. No idea I was actually getting a credit card. No idea. And then I was like, wait, I don't have to pay anything today? They're like, no, you're good. You got the rewards card. I was like, oh, man, that's awesome. Never made a payment. Never saw a bill. And then I start getting calls from like debt collectors. They're like, yeah, you never paid for this shirt. I was like, it was my rewards card. It was my rewards card.
My rewards card paid for it.
And like, yeah, that was a credit card. I was like, they never told me. And so that was bad. And then secondly, every time that I had gotten debt-free and done the Dave Ramsey plan, that I went out of it, my third, after that, probably my biggest regret, or if I'm going back in order to my biggest regret, would be not starting saving, investing early on. But right now, the top of my regret when you asked that question was that in 2021, I didn't buy a house.
Yeah. And what the market is
because I moved here in at the end of 2018.
18, yeah.
I didn't know. I mean, you never know how long you're going to be in a place.
Yeah.
And
that's when you sell it.
Yeah, I know.
and make $40,000 in the 3 years.
Rates hadn't gone up.
That's going to be his best one in a minute. I already know.
I was going to say,
yeah.
This man, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great segue into probably the best. And it's funny, he talks about that luck and sort of like risk plays more of a factor than what you think. It just so happened that my wife and I, we were able to build a home, purchase a home, and we started the process in 2020, closed in February of 21, and it just was the right time when the interest rates were so low, and then home values just started exploding. And I mean, it was by far the best investment I've ever made
Your
in my life.
interest rate was stupid.
Yeah, it was stupid low, and we
it made a lot of money in a really short amount of time.
It really did. And we were able to eventually sell the home and move in the home we are in now, and really improve our financial position.
That's awesome.
With some of the money from that. So it was just circumstances that happened, but something that definitely was our best decision we ever made. And what's great too is shout out to Kevin Illich, who helped me buy the home that I'm in now. But that has turned out to be a really good investment as well for when we bought it, and then there's some appreciation that's occurred just because of the market we're in here in Columbus. I think this one's going to turn out to be a good investment for us as well. So
you've done well in that regard.
Yeah, I've done
good
well.
For you.
To close the loop though on the car thing, I want to circle back around to this. It's funny, with the sale of the house, we were able to pay off the car that we have now. Mm-hmm. In that car was I was so upside down on that first car I bought in 2013 because it turned out to be a lemon too, which was the worst. Like, I mean, stuff started going wrong with it left and right. No offense if you own a Dodge, I'm never going to own a Dodge ever again in my life. And I had residual debt that I rolled into the next couple cars, but with the best decision I ever made, I was able to pay off the worst thing that ever happened to me.
There you go.
I finally closed the loop on that story. So
I'll try to make some quick because I can think of some really dumb investment things I've done. I remember one time, this will be a quick one. I remember one time, WorldCom. I don't know if you guys remember WorldCom.
Sounds familiar.
Probably not. But they're major network organization, infrastructure organization, WorldCom, that at the time supposedly had about 40% of the internet backbone. So this would have been probably back in early 2000s. So WorldCom has this major economic, like they basically tank. Their stock falls through the ground. I didn't own any, but at the time there was all this conversation about WorldCom, and a bunch of us in the information technology were like, they literally own 40% of the internet's backbone.
It's going to come back.
Like they can't go away. Like you can't just shut down WorldCom. Like the government will have to bail them out or something. So we were like, I got to buy stock. And it was like under $1. It was like not pennies, but it might have been like penny stock. It was probably a little bit more than that, but under $1. So I'm like, I got to do this. It wasn't a lot, but I took a few $100 or more and bought WorldCom stock. Someone else did. I'm like, it's got to. Just watched it continue to go down and down to where it was pennies. And then they came out and announced that they were restructuring with a Chapter 13 bankruptcy or something like that and being absorbed into something else. So all their stock just disappeared. That was just a small one. I've done that actually a couple times. I've done that one time I bought EV stock. Again, we're not talking about massive amounts of money. It was like $500. One time I bought EV stock based on advice from a teenager.
The way you just said that.
I can't really make it sound any better. I mean, literally, it wasn't necessarily the teenager, but the teenager who I knew fairly well, whose uncle traded stock.
I remember this Chance was like, bro,
There wasn't a chance. And
Tesla's about to go crazy.
and it was this stock, and it was like, hey, this one thinks it's going to be up by this by the end of the year. He buys all this EV, whatever stock. I was like, oh, he does? Okay, really? I'm going to do this. Bought $500, and when I bought it, it was literally the day. You know how it's like chance? You don't know. I literally bought when the stock was at the very highest it ever was. Like, because it was going up. Literally, it was like that month, it went up from like 2 something a share to it went up to like 5 something a share. I'm like, I got to get on this. I bought, and it was the very highest it ever was. After that, it went down, and it basically went down to nothing.
Okay.
Gone. Like, I mean, it was like
good.
No.
I was going to say, how about this? I don't know if we have time, but I'm curious question for y'all.
Mm-hmm.
That is, so, we talked about what is a money mindset that we absorbed growing up or from our experience.
Mm-hmm.
What is a money mindset shift for either of you that you've had to make, or that you feel like you need to make, or that you feel like you are in the process of making? I'll tell you one for me that I'm still working through.
Mm-hmm.
Remember a few years ago, I think it was like 2019, where we first went crazy in staff with like Basecamp and PCO and all these systems.
Yep.
And one of the guys on staff or one of our retreats made a phrase I think helped people at the time. So they're like, you may not be administratively gifted, but for part of your role, you need to be administratively minded. And so I think one of my biggest blind spots, probably financially, is that I've never really been driven by money. So I've never really thought that much about money, but probably to a detriment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been toying with this tension. You can be money-minded without being money-driven.
Mm-hmm.
And even money-minded, I don't even like the sound of that, because it makes you think like you just think about money. But in terms of the way you steward money is so important, because it's connected to your heart, number one. Number two, we've talked about in week one, you're creating freedom for yourself. You're creating the possibility to be more generous. And so for me, I think there was always a fear in the back of my mind. If I think about it too much, then I'll start being driven by it, or I'll start being distracted by it, or I'll start, whatever. And so for me, that's like been a shift of, okay, you can be more money aware without being money driven. And also, money doesn't grow on trees.
That you've discovered money doesn't grow on trees. Yeah. I think for me, I'll just say kind of like a shift that I've been in the process of for maybe the last couple years is, I think there's a part of me, we've had these conversations, a part of me that this is also connected to something else, but I always have different thoughts and ideas of doing different things, but I've never really given myself permission to go and create those things, and maybe even with it to earn more income. And I think one of the things that's been kind of eye-opening for me is like, what does it look like not to limit my mindset on income and what I can make by, well, I have this job. So whatever this job pays, that's what we have.
Yep.
Versus taking a different mindset, which is, I have this job and I'm grateful for it, and it provides this. Is there anything else in me that could generate more income? And again, I don't want to give my life to generating income. I don't want to be like money driven, like you said, and not for the purpose of just to have more income, but there's some goals and some things that I want to do that I even as I'm getting older and just kind of thinking about the future and realizing some of the things I wish I had done when I was younger, realizing I need to be more aggressive about them now, but also, I think, one of two things has to give. Like at some point you either have to change the goal because this income is not going to allow for that, or you keep the goal and you increase the income to allow for it. And so I think for me, it's kind of getting to a place of giving myself permission to go, well, if you can do that, and if you can go create this as well, and if you have a way to create some income using skill, things you've learned, and people want that, then it's okay to do that.
Yep.
So that's been probably a shift that I've had to make probably in the last few years.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I think for us, Rebecca and I think it's just how do we continue to live within means. I mean, I think that's always going to be a tension, especially as we have kids that are starting to. It's a myth. Sometimes people say, "Oh, have kids and it's going to be expensive." Actually, it's not as expensive when you first have kids.
Not early.
Not early. We're starting to get to the age where they're starting to get more expensive, and so like it's assessing. Okay, do we have enough money to sustain where I think we need to go? And so because of that, there's some like objectives and things that I'm looking at. Okay, what are some 5 to 10 year savings types accounts or things that I can do that will help me accelerate ways to make income or make extra money to be able to pay for some of those things. And so, and I think it's not tied to what you're saying, but I think like you don't have to have it all figured out to start taking steps.
Yep.
And I think that like some people want to wait. Oh, I have to, and some of this is like pushing back on the Dave Ramsey mindset a little bit because he'll brain, and I'm not anti Dave Ramsey. He's great. He's smart. You should listen to him. All the things, but like, his whole mantra is you got to get out of debt before you do anything. Mm-hmm. I get that, and for some people that can be a crippling thing. But sometimes I'm like, yeah, but if there's ways that you can, depending on your stage, like your stage of life and where you're at, that there's not small steps you can start taking, like it's good to do that. So for us, it's like, how do we continue to make steps that we need to take? Even though we were able to get to a better financial position, we still have some debt and things that we're trying to tackle as well. Student loans is the big thing. And so how do you continue to address that, but also not let take up all your extra income and have
still enjoy life along the way.
It's so hard. I don't know if you both feel this, but it's so hard to do all of those things. Right. It feels like with what you have and where you're at, and you can't take money with you, but at the same time you need money. And I'm grateful. Rebecca she's an incredible worker. She works 2 jobs and does incredible for our family. So we're blessed. We got 2 incomes to make things happen, and not everyone has that ability. And so I think it's just continuing. How do we? If I could sum all that up, that's a word salad to say, how do we continue to grow in our stewardship? And how do we continue to grow in our mastery of stewarding our resources well towards the best outcome for us and our family and our goals and where we're going?
Yeah.
I'm still, I feel like I'm still growing in that.
I think you're doing a great job with it, though.
Thank you.
I just want to say that. I think this is one of the reasons why, me personally, I'm kind of really passionate about helping younger people get some things figured out so that you don't have a 23-year-old going and buying a car that they probably shouldn't buy.
Yes.
Right? Or even just, you've talked before about this, but just even your journey with college and student debt and certain things.
Yes.
And it puts you behind in many ways of the things that you want to do or what you want to save for and do, because you're having to, it's that tension of having to do it. Right. And so like, for me, it's like I think you're doing a lot of the steps that you need to, and I think you're doing a great job of stewarding where you are and where you're going. Yeah, it's just like part of me. There's a passion in me, and maybe it's like I want to be able to help young people. I felt that with my daughters all becoming adults. Like I want to help you like make good decisions now, because 25-year-old later version of you is really going to thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any resources or projects you could create that would help?
I don't know. We'll
people?
See.
Oh, okay.
We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. That's an inside.
One last little nuance, though. PZ kind of alluded to this, but this is where the psychology of money is really important, because part of it is there are some basics, right?
Yeah.
Live within your means.
Right.
Like, don't be mastered by debt. But then part of it is kind of like what you alluded to. It's like, you almost have to decide. That is part of me. The older I get, I get the Dave Ramsey, live like no one else now, so you can live like no one else later. I don't want to live with a mountain of debt. I want to have discipline so I can have freedom later. But I also think there's a balance that people have to decide on. Like Tim Ferriss and like Nisha, even this young British girl, talk a lot about that idea too of like, you're not promised tomorrow, so you don't want to live carpe diem. But you do want to kind of enjoy life along the way. Oh, yeah. It is a bad plan to say, I'm going to be miserable and strapped for 20 years at the hope that when 20 years hits, It's Shawshank Redemption moment.
You know what is interesting, and we don't have enough time to go into this. Maybe this could be a part 2. And I'm nowhere near this age yet, but even as Americans save for retirement, it feels like that concept of like retirement is further and further away for a lot of people. And I think, especially as there's lots of talk, in our current political moment on future of social safety nets and different things of that nature. And there's a lot of millennial and younger people who are behind in terms of like retirement and different things like that. And so I was just thinking, like, I think a big adjustment that could be coming up for, let's say, millennials and younger could be even the future of work and how long you're gonna have to work and what that looks like, and how does that sustain into a longer period of time? Are we even called to retire on a deeper, more Christian Jesus level? It's an interesting thought. We can explore that more another time.
So anyways, I would just say I would not only recommend this book. It is one of the best books. Yes, it's not a practical how-to. And that is like, and coming from an investment banker, I think some people probably pick it up going, oh, this is going to tell me what I need to know so I can become rich. Oh, this is going to tell me. No, he actually delineates between what rich and wealthy is.
It's a fascinating book.
It is, because they're
engaging.
angles that you just would never think about, and it'll provoke you to think. And I'll just leave you with one thing I got. He also has a podcast. And so an investor friend of mine actually turned me on to his podcast and said, hey, I've been listening to his podcast. And one of the profound things that I heard in the podcast that I just want to mention, we'll close with this. And he got this from a study that he'd seen, but it's really talking about shopping and our brains. This is, again, all connected to debt and financial decisions that we make. And one of the things that he said that was just really fascinating was, he said, our brains don't care about stuff. Like we care about stuff. Like I care about clothes or whatever it could be, golf clubs, or pick whatever that thing is, right? That we think about, we obsess, and we try to figure out how we can get and buy. And he said, our brains don't think about stuff. Our brains don't care about stuff. It doesn't care how nice of a house we live in. It doesn't care what kind of car you drive. Your brain doesn't. Your brain doesn't care what kind of fashion that you wear, what brands you have, none of that. The only thing that your brain cares about in a physiological sense is a dopamine hit, right? The desire drug in your brain. And so it was interesting, kind of fascinating. And he's talking about like the things that cause your brain to release dopamine is surprise. The thing that causes your brain to release that dopamine is when there is a thrill of something. And so here was kind of the fascinating kind of like breakdown. He said, having stuff doesn't make you feel happy.
No.
Buying stuff does. Your brain literally releases dopamine that you get addicted to when you get something new. It's not the actual thing that you care about. It's that I need something new. And when you kind of, again, this is the psychology of money, and you kind of step back and you become aware of that and you realize that, right? All of a sudden you kind of like realize this is a trap. I keep feeling like I need to buy something new. Something new comes out. I need that. I need that. I need that. That is actually a dopamine trap that your brain has bought. Like it's kind of sold you, shall we say. And that's why we buy all this stuff that we don't really ultimately care about.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff we never even touched 2 months later, and we wore it one time. Or how many people have stuff in their closet that still has a tag on it that they've never worn? And it was, and so there's something to like understanding the psychology behind the way you think about money. And when you can unpack that a little bit and kind of realize the question is, can you retrain your brain? Can I understand that this stuff and buying that is not going to make me happy? It's the act of buying that is going to make me feel good for just a moment. And so I think this angle is just it's fascinating. So again, that's not in the book, but he does talk about that kind of stuff in a podcast if you want to follow his podcast. And I just think the more we can remove some of the unhealthy mindsets, the unhealthy thoughts that might not even, can I say it this way, might not have even be your fault. but they are your responsibility. Like, that's the reality. Is the way we think about debt, the way you think about debt may not be entirely your fault.
Yep.
It might be the environment you grew up in, what you were exposed to, the culture. I'm going to talk about that even this week. This will come out after. The environment you grew up in, it may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Yep.
And that's like one of those things
Yep.
where you understand and you go, because I'm going to talk about it. This podcast will come after, but in this week I'm talking about debt. And it is a trap in many ways, but I do think we don't maybe understand the soil of America and the consumer environment and the economy that we live in. We are primed for this trap.
Yep.
I mean, we are primed for this trap.
Yep.
It is a real thing.
Yep.
And so, like, having to kind of like unpack that a little bit, and the reason why I just wanted to highlight this book on a podcast is because I think we will just keep repeating some of the bad behaviors over and over until we actually address the psychology behind it.
Yep.
It's good.
Yep.
So-
So true. Good conversation.
Yeah.
All right. Buy the book and watch the series.
Yeah.
Buy the book, The Psychology of Money. Watch the series, How to Think About Money.
Yeah.
And send us in your mind shifts around money that you're having to make. And until next week, we will see you next time.
Hey guys, it's Russ. Thanks so much for listening. We really believe if we can get around tables instead of behind screens, if we can talk to each other instead of at each other, we can make the world better. To help us do that, here are a few things you can do to help. First, if you haven't yet, leave a review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe on YouTube. This helps more than you know. Also, if you have been impacted by the community out of which this podcast comes, that's X Church. Maybe you're local or you've been touched by the messages and impact across the country, even the world. I want to encourage you to support this work. A powerful life principle is to invest in the people and places that invest in you. And so I want to invite you to do that right now by going to thex.church/give. You can give a one-time small gift, a sacrificial gift, or even become a recurring partner. Together, let's keep elevating the conversation, thinking higher, loving deeper, and making the world better. Cheers.